"Mom, you should choose a place in the cemetery, not get married. Don't disgrace our family. He is younger than your son. Do you want to deprive us of our inheritance? In a few years you will die, and your Marcus will take everything from us." My eldest daughter shouted at me. I could not stand it. I went to the door, opened it, and kicked her out of my house. "Susan, relax. I wrote my will a long time ago, but you and your brother are not in it," I told her. This is not the first time she has looked for a place in the cemetery for me. Last year, for my birthday, they gave me a 20% discount on a burial in the local cemetery, which is located near the botanical garden. They thought they would make me happy. My son said, "Mom, that cemetery is so beautiful, everything is just the way you like it. There are many flowers and bees flying. You will rest there in beauty." I tried to explain to them that for now I want to live in peace and beauty. I have no plans to die. I have finally fallen in love and I want to be happy. Hi, I'm Andrea, and in a week I'm getting married. But that's just how I think, because no one in my family wants me to get married except me. I stood there with my hand still on the doorknob, listening to Susan's offended footsteps fade down my front walkway like a drum roll for a tragedy she'd written in her head. The funny part? She didn't even slam the gate. She wanted me to hear her leave, wanted it to sound like I was losing something. The only thing I lost was my patience, and frankly, I'd been looking for a reason to misplace it for years. I leaned my forehead against the door, breathed in the smell of lemon cleaner and lilacs from the bouquet on my kitchen table, and did what I've always done when life tries to bully me into a corner. I got practical. "Okay," I said out loud to my empty hallway. "If the children want a cemetery, I'll give them a funeral, but it won't be mine." That's the thing about being 66. People expect you to get soft, or quiet, or grateful for crumbs like a stray cat. They see the silver hair and the sensible shoes and assume your spirit is already folded and stored with the holiday decorations. Honey, my spirit is not stored. It is armed. I walked back into my kitchen and poured myself coffee like I was hosting a board meeting. My hands didn't shake. They used to, years ago, back when I thought being a good wife meant absorbing disappointment like a sponge and smiling so nobody felt awkward about my pain. Now, I don't absorb, I document. And because I've traveled more than most people's luggage, I've learned something. You can't control storms, but you can learn to fly through them with your seatbelt on and your lipstick steady. I work a lot. I'm the kind of woman who knows airport carpets by region, the kind who can identify a city by the smell of its morning air when the taxi window cracks open, the kind who keeps an extra phone charger in every purse, drawer, and coat pocket, because if you've ever been left alone in a moment of crisis, you learn redundancy. I built my career the way some women build a garden, seed by seed, season by season. Long meetings, late nights, the kind of years where you sleep 4 hours and convince yourself you're fine, because the mortgage doesn't care about your exhaustion and kids don't stop growing just because your marriage is shrinking. My company isn't a hobby. It's my spine. It's the thing that never betrayed me. Robert, my husband, used to like that about me. In the beginning, back when we were young enough to pretend love could be sustained by good intentions and a shared Netflix password, Robert was handsome in the way retired athletes are handsome: broad shoulders, heavy hands, that confident walk like he owned the ground. He'd worked hard. He'd earned his retirement. And when he retired, he did what so many men do when the structure of work disappears. He collapsed inward. At first, I tried to cushion the fall. "Let's go to the gym together," I'd suggest, tying my sneakers like a cheerful idiot. He'd wave me off without looking up from the television. "You go, I'll go tomorrow." Tomorrow, of course, was a myth in our house. Tomorrow was the place where his promises went to nap. "Come with me on my next trip," I'd say. "Just one. We'll eat in that little place by the river, remember? You loved it." He'd sigh like I was asking him to climb Everest barefoot. "Andrea, I'm tired. I don't want to be dragged around." Dragged around. That's what he called traveling with the woman he married. And depression. Oh, it was there, thick in the corners, a fog that clung to him. But Robert didn't say, "I'm depressed." He said things like, "What's the point? And I'm not interested, and everything hurts, and I'm just old." Old. He was 68 and acting like the Grim Reaper had moved into the guest room. I tried empathy. I tried space. I tried encouragement. I tried leaving brochures for volunteer programs on the kitchen counter like little paper lifeboats. He didn't pick them up. One evening, after I'd returned from a business trip that had eaten 3 time zones and a piece of my soul, I walked into the living room and saw him sitting in the dark, television on mute, eyes open but vacant. Robert, I said softly, like he was a skittish animal. This can't be your whole life. He blinked slowly. It is. Now listen. I am not a therapist. I'm a woman who negotiates contracts and reads people like spreadsheets. But I know despair when I see it. And I know what it does to a marriage. It turns love into logistics. I sat on the edge of the sofa and said the sentence that changed everything. Come to work with me. He looked at me like I'd suggested he join a circus. What? Not permanently. Just help out. A few hours. You're good with people. You're organized. You need purpose, Robert. You need to get out of this house before it swallows you. He laughed once, short and bitter. So now I'm your employee. Don't be dramatic. I'm dramatic? That was our new sport. Competitive resentment. But 2 days later, he came. Clean shirt, fresh shave, even cologne too much, if I'm honest. Like he wanted the world to smell him from across the room. I was relieved. I thought, finally, he's choosing life. I didn't know I was introducing him to death. The death of our marriage. My company has an open layout, bright glass walls, plants everywhere, the kind of place designed to make people feel alive and productive. I've always believed environment matters. A depressed man doesn't need dim corners. He needs light. I walked Robert through the office like a proud tour guide, introducing him to people who respected me, who knew my name, who didn't talk to me like I was a bank account with wrinkles. This is Robert, I said, smiling. My husband. Some people said hello politely and went back to work. Some asked what he did before retiring. Robert answered with this new, cautious charm, like he'd remembered how to be a person again. And then we reached Angela. Angela was 30 for sharp, ambitious, beautiful in a polished way that made men sit up straighter without understanding why. Dark hair, neat nails, eyes that looked like they'd never cried for anyone who didn't deserve it. Angela, I said, this is Robert. Her smile flickered toward him like a match. Nice to meet you, she said, and her voice dropped half an octave. I noticed. Of course I noticed. But I thought it meant she was being professional. I thought it meant she was being respectful. I didn't realize she was tasting the situation like a woman deciding whether dessert is worth the calories. Robert, to my surprise, smiled back. Not his tired smile. Not his I'm barely here smile. A young smile. The kind I hadn't seen in years. I should have felt happy. I should have thought good. Work is helping him. But a strange coldness ran under my ribs. That's intuition. By the way, it's not magic. It's pattern recognition built from surviving things. Over the next weeks, Robert started dressing nicer. He'd shave every morning. He bought a new belt. He ironed shirts like he was auditioning for a role. And he began asking me questions he'd never asked before. What time will you be home? Which trip is this again? How long are you gone? At first, I thought it was concern, a husband caring, trying. Then it became accounting. I'd wake up at 5 to catch flights. He'd be up too, standing in the kitchen, leaning on the counter like he was casual, like he just happened to be awake. He started helping around the office more often, offering to drop something off, pick something up. He insisted on stopping by, and Angela, suddenly, was always near him. Robert, do you mind? She'd say, handing him something small to do. You're so good at this. Good at this. Like he was the only capable man left on earth. Once, I walked into the break room and saw her laughing at something he'd said, her hand on his forearm. Her fingers lingered. When she looked up and saw me, her hand slid away like it had never been there. A seamless retreat. Hi, Andrea, she chirped, as if she didn't just touch my husband like he was hers to touch. I smiled. I am very good at smiling. But that coldness in my ribs grew teeth. I told myself I was paranoid. I told myself I was tired. I told myself I had watched too many dramas on airplanes with bad subtitles. Robert was depressed. I reminded myself. He needed connection. He needed people. And I gave him people. Here's the funny thing about being the strong one in a family. People start thinking you don't need protection. They think you don't need honesty. They think you can handle anything. So they stop treating your heart like it matters. Robert's birthday came in late spring. I'd been on a brutal trip, 3 cities, a conference, 2 presentations, 1 client who kept calling me sweetheart like it was 1952. I survived on coffee and stubbornness. And I decided, I'm coming home early. I'm going to surprise him. I'm going to make him feel loved. I'm going to cook his favorite dinner. buy the expensive cake he pretends he doesn't want, and remind him we still exist. I didn't tell him. I wanted it to be special. I drove home from the airport with that hopeful, foolish excitement women get when we're trying to fix something that should not be ours alone to fix. The sunset was pink, the kind that makes you believe the universe is romantic. I pulled into the driveway quietly. The house looked normal, lights on, curtains drawn. My heart thudded. I carried my suitcase to the front door, key in hand. And then I heard it. Not a scream, not a dramatic noise, just laughter. A woman's laugh, soft, delighted, intimate. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. Then I opened the door. The house smelled like perfume that wasn't mine. I stepped inside, shoes off, quiet. The laugh came again, from upstairs, from our bedroom. Our bedroom. I don't remember climbing the stairs. I only remember the carpet under my feet and the way my body felt like it was moving through water. The door to my bedroom was slightly open, and there on my sheets was Robert, and there like a cruel joke wearing eyeliner was Angela, 34, bare skin, my colleague, my employee, the woman I had introduced into my home without knowing she'd arrived there through my husband's zipper. For a second, my brain tried to reject it, like a computer refusing to load a corrupted file. My breath caught, my fingers went numb. Then something in me snapped so cleanly it felt like a bone breaking. What? I said, and it didn't sound like my voice. It sounded like someone else's, someone calm, someone dangerous. What is this? Robert scrambled up, grabbing the sheet like it could cover shame. Angela sat up slowly, eyes wide, not with regret, but with calculation, like she was scanning for exits. Andrea, Robert began. Don't, I said. Angela opened her mouth. I held up a hand. No, not you. I pay you. That means you don't speak unless I ask. She blinked like she couldn't believe someone had talked to her that way. Robert tried again. It's not what you think, I laughed. It wasn't hysterical. It was the kind of laugh that comes from knowing the world is ridiculous and cruel and still believing you can outsmart it. My love, I said, using the tone I used in negotiations when someone tried to play dumb. I am looking at you naked with my colleague in my bed. If it's not what I think, it's worse. Because then it means I've lost my eyesight. Angela threw the sheet around herself like a cape. Andrea? I didn't. Stop, I said again, sharper. You're leaving, now. Robert stood, half-dressed. Andrea, please, you're leaving too, I said. He stared at me. This is my house too. I smiled. Not today. I walked to the closet and yanked out a suitcase, one of mine actually, the sturdy one I use for international trips. I tossed it on the bed like it was a judgment. You, I pointed at Robert, take what you can carry in 5 minutes. Anything left becomes a donation, to charity, or to the landfill. Depends on my mood. His mouth fell open. You can't, I can, I said, voice steady. And I will. Angela tried to slip past me toward the hallway. I stepped aside like a queen, allowing a servant to pass. Don't come back to work, I told her calmly. You're done. Also, I'm sending HR an email in 5 minutes, and I'm attaching a photo of you in my bed. Smile, Angela. Her face strained. You wouldn't. Oh, I said, I absolutely would. But don't worry, I won't. Because I don't need to prove anything to anyone. You already proved it for me. Robert's hands shook as he stuffed clothes into the suitcase. He looked like a man watching his life collapse and fast forward. Where am I supposed to go? He asked, voice smaller. I tilted my head. Your parents' house. You'll be comfortable. You can be depressed there too. Maybe their furniture will match your mood. He flinched. Andrea, please. It was a mistake. A mistake is buying the wrong brand of coffee, I said. This is a decision. A series of decisions. Many of them. I walked out of the room, went downstairs, and opened the front door. The night air hit my face like a slap, but it was clean, fresh, honest. I waited at the bottom of the stairs like a bouncer at a club. Angela came down first, clutching her shoes, hair messy, eyes furious. You're ruining my life, she hissed. I smiled brightly. No, sweetheart, I'm just returning the favor. Then Robert came, suitcase bumping down the steps behind him like an insult. He stopped at the door, eyes wet. Andrea, we had years. Yes, I said quietly, and you spent them being sad while I held everything up. Then, when you finally felt alive, you chose to set me on fire to warm yourself. He swallowed. I opened the door wider. Out. He stepped outside. I followed him, shut the door behind him, and locked it. Then I locked it again, because sometimes you need symbolism. He pounded once softly. Andrea? I walked away, not running, not crying, just walking. In the kitchen, I poured the coffee I'd made earlier down the sink. Then I called my lawyer. By morning, I had filed for divorce. By afternoon, Robert was calling me nonstop, apologizing, begging, accusing, sobbing, bargaining. And by evening, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine, staring at the sky like it was a blank page. I truly thought it was the end of the world, until Kate showed up. Kate is the kind of friend you make once in your life if you're lucky, one of those women who sees you clearly and doesn't flinch. We'd met decades ago, when my children were small and her husband was still alive and the world still pretended it was fair. We'd survived layoffs, funerals, bad haircuts, menopause, and men who couldn't find the laundry basket if it was glowing. When the doorbell rang and I opened it, there she stood with a casserole dish in her hands like a weapon of comfort. You look like hell, she said. Thank you, I replied. Come in. And behind her stood a man, tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair touched with gray at the temples, a face that was too serious to be handsome until he smiled and then it became unfair. This is my son, Marcus, Kate said, nudging him forward. He insisted on carrying the heavy things. Marcus held out the casserole like it was an offering. Hi, Andrea. I'm sorry for what you're going through. His voice was warm, calm, respectful. He looked at me like I was a person, not a problem to solve, not a mother to manage, not an aging woman to bury. I felt something in my chest shift. Not love, not yet, but relief. Kate shoved her way inside, hugging me hard. Sit, eat, talk, or don't talk. I don't care, but you're not doing this alone. We sat at my kitchen table. Kate chattered about traffic, about a neighbor's ridiculous dog, about anything to fill the silence until I was ready. Marcus listened, occasionally smiling, occasionally asking a question that showed he was actually paying attention. When I finally told them what happened, Robert, Angela, my bed, Kate's eyes narrowed like she was sighting a target. That man, she said slowly, has always been a coward. Marcus's jaw clenched. You didn't deserve that. I shrugged, trying to keep it light. Apparently I did. According to my children, I deserve a cemetery discount and a quiet death. Kate snorted. Your children are idiots. Marcus looked startled, then amused. She's blunt. I'm honest, Kate corrected. Blunt is what you are when you're trying to be mean. I'm trying to save lives. That night, after Kate left, Marcus stayed behind to wash dishes. I can do it, I protested. I know, he said, smiling, but I want to. My mom asked me to make sure you ate something. She'll interrogate me later. I laughed despite myself. And that was the beginning of my mistake. You see, when you've been starved for tenderness, you start confusing basic kindness with romance. When a man looks you in the eye and listens, it feels like intimacy. When he brings you a plate, it feels like devotion. Marcus came by the next day, and the next, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with groceries, sometimes just with that calm presence that made my house feel less haunted. He never touched me inappropriately, never crossed lines, never made jokes that made me uncomfortable. He was decent, and I apparently had forgotten what decent looked like. One evening, Kate called and said, Marcus is taking you to dinner. I didn't agree to that, I said, suspicious. You don't have to agree, she sang. You just have to eat. Marcus arrived with a simple bouquet, wildflowers, not expensive roses. He looked nervous in a way that was oddly charming. Hi, he said. My mom, well, she asked me to make sure you got out of the house. I tried to tease him. So this is charity. He smiled. It's dinner, and I like dinner. We went to a small restaurant where the lights were soft and the food tasted like someone cared. We talked about travel, my work trips, his job, his hobbies. He told me about his childhood and how Kate had raised him mostly alone after his father died. You turned out well, I said. Because she didn't let me become an entitled fool, he said. I laughed again, a little bitter. My kids think I'm a walking inheritance. Marcus's eyes sharpened. That's disgusting. It's family, I said, trying to brush it off. No, he said quietly. That's greed wearing a familiar face. We ate, we talked. For the first time since the bedroom scene, I felt almost normal. When he drove me home, the night was cold, but the car was warm. We sat in the driveway a moment, the engine idling. Thank you, I said, for tonight. He nodded. Of course. And here it comes, the humiliating part. I leaned toward him. not dramatically, not lunging, just leaning, like the moment was obvious, like the warmth between us meant something mutual. I reached out, fingers brushing his shoulder. Marcus stiffened. Andrea, he said gently, wait, but I didn't. I moved toward his mouth, my eyes already closing, and he pushed me away, not harshly, not cruelly, but firmly, like you would stop someone from stepping into traffic. My eyes snapped open. Heat rushed to my face so fast I thought I might faint. I'm sorry, I blurted, voice cracking. I misread. Marcus's expression was pained, not angry. You didn't do anything wrong, he said quickly. You're going through a lot, and I care about you. I laughed weakly. Care, yes, that's the word. He swallowed. You're my mom's friend, Andrea. I respect you. But I'm not looking at you that way. The words hit like cold water. I stared at him, forcing myself to nod, because pride is a muscle and I refuse to let mine atrophy. Of course, I said, too brightly. How silly of me. Old women and their romantic delusions. Don't, he said, soft but firm. Don't talk about yourself like that. I opened the car door. Good night, Marcus. Good night, he replied. I stepped out and walked into my house with my chin up and my humiliation tucked under my ribs like contraband. Inside, I stood in the dark hallway and pressed my fingers to my lips, as if I could erase the mistake. And then I did something I almost never do. I took leave from work. Not long, just a short leave, a few days, because I needed air. I needed distance. I needed to stop being Andrea the CEO and Andrea the betrayed wife and Andrea the mother of grave-digging children. I needed to be Andrea the girl I used to be. So I went to my place of strength, the town where I grew up. It's small, one of those places where people still wave, where the diner still serves pie that tastes like childhood, where the streets hold your memories like old photographs. I drove there alone, windows cracked, music low. The farther I got from my city life, the lighter my chest felt. I rented a small room near the river, the kind of place with creaky floors and quilts that smell like sunshine. And for a day, I breathed. Then Robert started calling again. At first, he begged, Andrea, please, don't do this. We can fix it. Then he got angry. You're being dramatic. It was just. Then he threatened. You don't think you can take everything from me, do you? I stared at my phone like it was a snake. Robert, I said calmly when I finally answered, I don't want everything. I want peace. Well, you won't get it, he spat. Half of it is mine. The house, the savings, the company. I laughed. I truly laughed, because the audacity was almost art. The company? I said. Robert, you didn't even know how to log into the payroll system. You're not getting away with this, he shouted. I hung up, and I reminded myself of something I've learned after decades of working with contracts, lawyers, and men who overestimate their entitlement. The law is not a mood, it's a structure. And I had built my life on structure. Everything I had earned, every asset, every investment, every inch of stability had my fingerprints on it. I had receipts. I had records. I had years of documentation showing what came from my work and what came from his. Robert had his retirement, yes, but he hadn't built my company. He hadn't traveled for it. He hadn't missed sleep for it. He hadn't made deals, taken risks, carried stress. He had watched television and called it rest. So no, he wasn't taking what I built. I returned to the city with a plan. Forget Marcus, focus on work, finish this divorce cleanly, and reclaim my life. And for a few days, it seemed possible. Then the court date arrived for the property division. I walked into that courtroom in a navy suit that made me feel like a blade. My hair was neat. My face was calm. My hands were steady. Robert sat at the other table with his lawyer. He looked sickly thin, eyes shadowed, mouth tight, not from remorse, from resentment. And behind him, like two knives in my back, sat Susan and my son, my children, supporting him. I felt a sharp physical pain in my chest, not heartbreak, something closer to nausea. Susan wouldn't look at me. My son stared ahead like he was attending a boring lecture. The judge entered. We stood, we sat, and the circus began. Robert's lawyer talked about marital contribution and shared life and equitable division. He made Robert sound like a noble man who had supported me. Supported me? The man couldn't even support his own mood. Then Susan testified. Yes, Susan. My daughter stood up and told the court she believed her father deserved half of everything because they were married for decades. My son added that my father had sacrificed too, that he had depression and needed security. Security. As if my years of work had been a hobby I picked up for fun. When it was my turn, I stood. I looked at the judge, a woman with a sharp gaze and a face that had seen every kind of lie. And I told the truth. I told her how I had worked for years, sleeping 4 hours a day to provide for my family. How I had traveled constantly, built a company, kept a home running, paid for college, covered bills, repaired the damage Robert left behind. I told her how Robert suffered from addiction, how it drained money and joy and trust. How I begged him to get help, how he would promise, then hide bottles, then blame me for nagging. I told her how he struggled with depression and refused treatment, how he sat in darkness while I carried everything, how I finally brought him to my company to give him purpose only for him to seek solace in the arms of another woman. I didn't cry. I didn't dramatize. I simply laid out the facts like evidence on a table, because that's what they were, facts. When I finished, the courtroom was silent. The judge asked a few questions, precise, sharp. Then she reviewed documents, records, dates, proof. And when she spoke, her voice was clear. The decision landed like a gavel in my bones. What I earned would remain mine, not because she pitied me, because the law recognized what I had built. Robert's face twisted, half fury, half disbelief. Susan went pale. My son looked down, suddenly fascinated by the floor. I stood there, breathing in the moment like oxygen. I won, not in some petty way, in the way that meant I would not be punished for being the strong one. When it ended, I walked out of the courtroom on legs that felt unfamiliar, like they belonged to a woman stepping into a new life. I turned the corner into the hallway, wanting only to get outside, feel air, escape the stench of betrayal. And that's when I saw him, Marcus. He was sitting on the hard wooden bench, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the courtroom door like he'd been waiting for a verdict he cared about. My stomach dropped. I lowered my head, embarrassed, still haunted by that kiss, by the way he'd pushed me away, by my own foolishness. I tried to walk past him quietly, but Marcus stood. He stepped into my path gently, not blocking like a threat, more like a shelter. He reached out, took my hand, and pulled me into a firm hug that felt like warmth after months of cold. "Congratulations," he murmured near my ear. "You deserve it. You are a very strong woman." And my breath caught because I knew, in that instant, that something had shifted. Not the court, not the divorce, something in me. And I didn't yet know what it would cost, or what it would give me. But I knew the next chapter had just begun. Marcus kept his arms around me for exactly the right amount of time, long enough to make my lungs remember how to breathe, short enough not to make me feel trapped. That was his gift. He knew how to show up without taking over. When he pulled back, he didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't say, "I'm here, aren't I?" He didn't even mention the last time we were in a car together and I tried to kiss him like a fool who'd mistaken courtesy for destiny. He just looked at me, eyes steady. "You okay?" he asked. I swallowed. "I'm fine." He smiled slightly, like he'd heard that lie before and didn't intend to punish me for it. "Want me to walk you to your car?" "I can walk," I said automatically. "I know." He nodded toward the courthouse doors. "Let me walk anyway." That's how it began, quietly, not with fireworks or declarations, but with one calm man refusing to let me carry everything alone. Outside, the air was crisp. My hands were still cold from courtroom adrenaline. Marcus opened his coat and, without making it a dramatic gesture, draped it over my shoulders. "I'm not a fragile old woman," I muttered, but my voice didn't have much bite. "I didn't say you were," he replied. "But even strong women get cold." That line slid under my skin in a way I didn't like, because it was true, and because it was kind, and because I'd spent too long around people who treated my strength like a reason to neglect me. At my car, he didn't lean in for a hug. He didn't try to touch me. He simply handed me my keys and said, "I'm proud of you." I stared at him. "Why?" He looked surprised. "Because you stood up for yourself, and you didn't let them rewrite your story." My throat tightened. "You didn't have to be there." "I wanted to be," he said, and then he stepped back like he was giving me space to decide what that meant. I drove home with his coat on the passenger seat, and I kept glancing at it as if it were a living thing. It smelled faintly of cedar and clean laundry. It smelled like someone's life is in order. When I got home, my phone buzzed. A text from Kate. "Did you win?" I stared at the screen, then typed, yes. A second later, good. Also, Marcus says he's walking you to your car. Translation, he cares. Don't be stubborn. I laughed, short and sharp, then sat in my kitchen and laughed again, longer this time, because my life had become so absurd it was either laugh or start flipping tables. I was still laughing when the doorbell rang. I wiped my eyes, opened the door, and there stood Marcus, holding a bouquet. Not roses, not the dramatic "I'm courting you" kind. Sunflowers. Big, ridiculous, unapologetically cheerful sunflowers, like a child picked them for a teacher they adore. I wasn't sure what to do, he said, shifting his weight, suddenly a little awkward. I thought flowers might be appropriate. I took them, staring at their bright faces. Sunflowers. He shrugged. They're hard to ignore. Yes, I said slowly. They are. And so was he. He didn't come inside. He didn't assume. He just stood on my porch like a man waiting to be invited into a world that wasn't his. I'm sorry about your kids, he said quietly. I scoffed, but it came out tired. My kids have been practicing for my funeral for years. Today was just a rehearsal dinner. Marcus's mouth tightened. That's cruel. It's accurate. He hesitated, then said, if you want, we could get dinner. Not because my mom told me to, because I'd like to. There it was. A new sentence. A new possibility. My instinct was to protect myself by making a joke. Are you sure you want to be seen in public with a woman who apparently should be shopping for cemetery plots? He smiled, and it was a real smile this time, warm, a little wicked. Andrea, if anyone says something, I'll tell them you're immortal out of spite. I laughed again, and the sound surprised me. It sounded like me before my marriage turned into a slow leak. Fine, I said. Dinner. But if you order me soup and call it light, I'm throwing a breadstick at you. His eyes brightened. Deal. That dinner was not romantic. Not in the way movies want it to be. There was no violin music. No candlelight designed to seduce. It was easy. We talked about everything and nothing. He asked questions that showed he cared about the answers. He listened without scanning the room for someone younger and shinier. He didn't interrupt to fix me. And when I teased him, he teased back, like he wasn't afraid of my sharp edges. After dinner, we walked along the river in the city park. The wind was cold enough to sting, and I kept my hands in my pockets, pretending I didn't wish someone would hold them. Marcus didn't grab me. He didn't test boundaries. He simply walked beside me, close enough that his shoulder occasionally brushed mine. And every time it did, my body reacted like it had been sleeping for years and was slowly waking up. When he dropped me off at home, he stood on my porch again, hands in his coat pockets. I had a good time, he said. So did I admitted. He nodded then, as if fighting the urge to do something impulsive, he said, can I see you again? I surprised myself by saying, yes. He exhaled, like he'd been holding his breath. Okay. Good night, Andrea. Good night, Marcus. He left, and I closed the door and leaned against it, heart thudding like I was 30. Then my phone buzzed. Robert. I stared at the screen until it stopped. Then Susan. Then my son. I didn't answer. For the first time in a long time, I chose peace. Over the next weeks, Marcus became a quiet presence in my life. He didn't swoop in. He didn't make grand speeches. He just showed up. He brought flowers again, this time daisies. Why daisies? I asked, suspicious. He shrugged. They look tough, like they can survive weather. I narrowed my eyes. Are you calling me a weed? He grinned. I'm calling you someone who doesn't die easily. I'll accept that, I said, and put them in water. He started texting me in the mornings. Did you sleep? It was a small question, but it hit me like an accusation, because no one had asked me that in years, no one who actually cared about the answer. Sometimes I replied, for hours. Don't lecture me. And he'd reply, not lecturing, just plotting ways to steal you from your calendar. He took me on dates that didn't feel like auditions. A museum, a bookstore, a quiet jazz bar where he didn't stare at his phone like I was background noise. One Saturday, he drove me out of town to a little farm stand with homemade pies. The woman behind the counter looked at us and smiled in that knowing way older women do, like she could see the whole story just by the way Marcus held the door open for me. I felt my face warm. Marcus bought a pie, then leaned in and whispered, that lady thinks we're scandalous. Are we? I whispered back. He glanced at me, eyes playful. We could be. It startled a laugh out of me, half delight, half shock. I didn't notice the age difference most days because it didn't feel like older woman, younger man. It felt like woman who's tired of being punished for living and man who refuses to treat her like an expiration date. Marcus didn't act like my caretaker. He didn't baby me. He challenged me. Once, I started to apologize for talking too much about work, and he stopped me. Don't shrink, he said. I blinked. Excuse me? You do that? He continued, voice calm. You start to take up less space when you feel vulnerable. Like you're afraid people will leave if you're too much. My chest tightened. I'm not afraid. He looked at me for a long moment. Andrea, you've been alone inside that marriage for a long time. You got used to carrying things quietly, but you don't have to do that with me. I stared at him, suddenly furious not at him, but at the truth he'd just pulled into the light. I'm fine, I snapped. He didn't flinch. I know you are. That's not the point. I hated that he could see me. I also adored it. Then came the day he met my children again. It was unavoidable. Susan showed up at my house unannounced, the way she always did when she wanted control. My son came with her, as if they'd rehearsed their indignation in the car. I opened the door and said, "No." Susan shoved past me anyway. "We need to talk." "Do you?" I asked sweetly. "Or do you need to perform?" My son cleared his throat. "Mom, Dad is responsible for his own life," I cut in. "And so are you." Susan looked around my living room like she was searching for evidence of crime. Her gaze landed on Marcus's jacket draped over a chair. She froze. "He's here." I didn't answer, because I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of watching me defend my happiness like it was a guilty pleasure. Marcus stepped out of the kitchen holding a mug. He paused when he saw them, then set the mug down slowly, expression polite but guarded. "Hi," he said. Susan's eyes narrowed like a predator catching scent. "So it's true." Marcus glanced at me, as if checking whether I wanted him to speak. I didn't need rescuing, but I appreciated that he asked with his eyes. Susan pointed at him. "This is disgusting." I laughed softly. "Ah, Susan, there it is. Your favorite word. You use it whenever something isn't about you." My son looked uneasy. "Mom, you're making a mistake." Marcus's jaw tightened. "With respect, you don't get to decide that." Susan swung toward him. "Oh, I'm sorry. Are you her lawyer now?" I tilted my head. "Actually, my lawyer is far scarier." Susan's face went red. "Mom, he's using you." Marcus's eyes flashed. "Using her for what?" Susan gestured wildly. "Her money, her house, her everything." I stepped forward, voice suddenly cold. "Susan, if you say the word inheritance again in my house, I'll spray you with the plant mister like a bad cat." My son tried to reason. "Mom, he's younger than me. And you're younger than your father." I snapped. "Should I have refused to marry Robert? Or is it only wrong when it threatens your future shopping plans?" Susan's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Marcus spoke gently. "Andrea doesn't need anyone to take care of her. She's extraordinary." Susan made a sound of disgust. "Oh, please." I raised a hand. "Enough, both of you. You can be unhappy in your own homes, not mine." They left, furious. When the door shut, I exhaled hard. My hands were trembling now, not from fear, but from rage, the old rage of a mother realizing her children had become strangers. Marcus stepped closer. "Are you okay?" I swallowed. "I want to throw something." He nodded. "We can throw something. There's a thrift store down the road. We can buy ugly plates and smash them responsibly." I stared at him, then laughed so suddenly it turned into a sob that surprised us both. Marcus didn't panic. He just wrapped his arms around me, steady and warm, and in that hug, I felt something shift again. Not just comfort, trust. A month later, Marcus asked me to meet him at a small rooftop restaurant. I arrived in a black dress and a coat that made me feel like I had secrets. He stood when he saw me, eyes soft. "You look," he began. "Old," I offered dryly. He shook his head, smiling. "You look like a woman who knows exactly what she wants." "That's because I do," I said, sitting. Dinner was wonderful. He was nervous in a way that didn't suit him, fingers tapping the table. At first, I thought he was about to tell me something bad, like he was moving away, or he'd met someone else, or he'd realized dating me was a complicated hobby. Then, after dessert, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. My heart stopped like it had hit a wall. "Oh," I whispered. Marcus opened it. A ring, not enormous, not flashy, elegant, simple, confident. Andrea, he said, voice steady despite the nervousness in his eyes. I love you. I know it's not conventional. I know people will talk, but I don't care. I want you. I want a life with you. Will you marry me? Every sound in the restaurant faded. The world narrowed to that box, that ring, that man. And my first instinct was not joy. It was fear. Because love, for women like me, isn't a fantasy. It's a risk assessment. My brain started listing dangers like bullet points. He'll get bored. People will judge him. My children will destroy this. I'm 66. What if I get sick? What if he regrets it? What if I do? I stared at him, then whispered, Marcus, are you sure? He didn't hesitate. Yes. My chest tightened. My vision blurred. I stood so abruptly my chair scraped. I need. Marcus rose too, alarmed. Andrea, it's okay. You don't have to. I need air, I said, voice shaking. I need time. His face fell, but he nodded. Okay, take time. I left. And yes, this is the part where I behaved like a frightened teenager, even though I have wrinkles and a 401k. I disappeared for 2 days, not because I wanted to punish him, not because I wanted drama, because my whole life, I had been the responsible one, the stable one, the one who didn't collapse. And now, the possibility of being truly loved by someone who wasn't draining me felt almost unsafe. I turned off my phone. I drove to the same river town where I'd healed before. I rented the same creaky room. I sat by the water and stared at my reflection like I was trying to recognize myself. Who was I without my marriage? Without being needed? Without being the woman who holds everything up? I thought about Robert, about his betrayal, about my children's cold eyes in court. I thought about Marcus, how he'd hugged me in the courthouse hallway, how he'd brought sunflowers, how he listened, how he didn't try to control me. And I realized something that made me laugh out loud by the river like a lunatic. I was afraid not because Marcus was dangerous. I was afraid because he wasn't. If he hurt me, I could survive. I've survived worse. But if he loved me well, then I'd have to stop bracing for impact. And that oddly was terrifying. On the second day, I turned my phone back on. There were messages. From Kate, you better not be dead. From Marcus, I'm here. I'm not angry. I just want to know you're safe. From Susan, if you marry him, you will ruin your life. From my son, Mom, please think. And one more from Marcus, I love you even if you say no, but I hope you say yes. That one cracked me open. I drove back to the city with my hands steady on the wheel, feeling like I was driving toward myself. Marcus was at home when I arrived because at some point, without announcing it, he'd started staying with me more often. Not moving in officially, just being there. Like a habit my house had grown attached to. He opened the door and stopped when he saw me. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to run to me. Then he controlled himself, standing still like he didn't want to frighten me. Hi, he said softly. Hi, I replied. His voice trembled slightly. Are you okay? I nodded. I'm sorry. He shook his head quickly. Don't apologize. I pushed something big on you. You didn't push, I said, stepping closer. You offered. His eyes searched my face. Andrea? I reached into my purse and pulled out the ring box he'd given me. I'd taken it with me. I don't know why. Maybe because I couldn't bear the idea of leaving it behind like a rejection. I opened it and held it out. He went pale. Is this? I'm saying yes, I said, voice steady. His breath caught. You are? Yes, I repeated. But listen to me. I am not a woman who needs saving. I will not be controlled. I will not be treated like an investment. I will not. Marcus stepped forward, eyes shining. Andrea, I love you because you don't need saving. My throat tightened. Good, because I'm terrible at being rescued. He laughed, and then, finally, he pulled me into his arms. This time, when he kissed me, it was slow, like he was asking permission with every second. And I kissed him back like a woman deciding to live. Once I said yes, reality arrived quickly, wearing chaos. Kate cried. Then she laughed. Then she said, finally, I knew you had a pulse under all that professionalism. I told my children. That conversation went exactly as you'd expect, like a funeral directed by angry accountants. Susan arrived with her usual fury. My son came in tight-lipped. You're actually doing it, Susan said, eyes wide. You're actually marrying him. Yes, I said calmly. I am. My son rubbed his forehead. Mom, this is insane. I leaned back in my chair. You know what was insane? Supporting your father in court after he cheated on me with a woman younger than you. Susan flinched. That's exactly what it was. I cut in. And if we're going to discuss insanity, let's start there. Susan's voice rose. He's using you. I smiled. I already did this conversation, Susan. Come up with new material. My son tried a softer approach. Mom, we're worried. You're worried, I said, that my happiness will reduce your control. Susan's eyes flashed. We're worried about the inheritance. I said, nodding. There it is. The family love language. My son's cheeks reddened. Mom, that's unfair. Unfair? I repeated, voice sharpening. I fed you. I clothed you. I paid for your education. I carried this family while your father collapsed and wandered and cheated. And now you want to lecture me about fairness? Silence. Then Susan crossed her arms. If you marry him, don't expect us to be there. I held her gaze. I wasn't going to. Her mouth dropped open. Excuse me? I sat forward slightly, voice calm like ice. You're not invited. Neither of you. My son blinked. Mom, no, I said. I'm done begging my own children to treat me like a human being. You can go to your father's next wedding when he finds another mistress. And don't worry about me. I will cope. Susan's eyes filled with angry tears. You're choosing him over us. I exhaled slowly. No, Susan. I'm choosing myself. You are welcome to love me while I do that. Or you can keep auditioning for my funeral. They left furious. And I sat there shaking not from doubt, but from the terrible pain of drawing a boundary with people you once carried in your body. Marcus found me afterward, standing in the kitchen with my hands pressed to the counter. Hey, he said gently. What happened? I disinvited my children from my wedding, I said flatly. He didn't look shocked. He just nodded slowly, as if he'd expected it. Do you regret it? He asked. I swallowed. I regret that it had to happen. He stepped closer, resting a hand on my shoulder. You're allowed to protect your joy. That sentence felt like permission I'd never received. And then because life enjoys irony, something in me softened. Not toward their behavior, but toward their fear. My children had watched their father rot inside himself for years. They'd watched me hold everything up. They'd learned that love was transactional, that stability was something you extract, not something you build. They were wrong, but they were also my children. A week later, I called Susan. She answered with a brittle, "What? I'm inviting you to lunch," I said. A pause. Why? Because I'm still your mother, I said. And because I don't want to walk into my wedding with hatred in my bones, she scoffed. So you want me to pretend? No, I replied. I want you to listen. We met at a cafe. Susan arrived armored, perfect hair, sharp lipstick, that look of determination like she was going into battle. I didn't fight her. I didn't plead. I told her the truth quietly. I'm not marrying Marcus to punish you, I said. I'm marrying him because I feel alive with him, because he treats me with respect, because I'm not finished living. Susan's eyes flickered. You're 66. Yes, I said, which means I have fewer years left to waste on other people's approval. She looked down at her coffee. Dad says you're trying to destroy him. I laughed softly. Your father destroyed himself long before I filed paperwork. She swallowed hard. He's not doing well. I'm sorry, I said honestly, but his wellness is not my responsibility anymore. Susan's eyes lifted, suddenly raw. I don't want you to get hurt again. That startled me more than any insult. Is that true? She hesitated too long. I leaned in. Susan, do you know why I cut you out of my will? Her face went pale. Because you're cruel. No, I said, voice steady. Because you started treating me like a bank account with a heartbeat, and I needed you to learn that love doesn't come with a payout. She stared at me, breathing shallowly. Then, very quietly, she said, I didn't mean it like that. Maybe you didn't, I said, but that's how it felt. Silence stretched. Finally, Susan whispered, What do you want from me? I held her gaze. I want you to be my friend at my wedding. Her eyes snapped up. Friend? Yes, I said. Not guardian, not judge, not accountant, just my daughter who stands beside me because she wants me to be happy, even if she doesn't understand it. Susan's throat moved. She looked away quickly, blinking too fast. I'll think about it, she muttered. That was not a yes, but it wasn't a no, and at my age, I've learned to recognize small openings as miracles. The wedding approached like a train, beautiful, unstoppable, loud. Marcus and I chose a small venue with a garden. I refused anything that looked like a funeral, which given my children's obsession felt like an important detail. Sunflowers appeared everywhere. Marcus said it wasn't intentional, but I didn't believe him. Men pretend they don't plan things when they absolutely do. Kate took over like a general. She arranged flowers, called vendors, bullied a baker into making a cake that tasted like heaven. 2 days before the wedding, Robert showed up at my door. I opened it and felt my stomach drop, not because I missed him, but because seeing him was like seeing a ghost of the woman I used to be. He looked older, smaller. His eyes were wet. "Andrea?" he whispered. "Please. What do you want?" I asked, voice flat. He swallowed. "Don't marry him." I stared. "That's rich. Just don't," he pleaded. "It's humiliating." I laughed once. "For you?" He flinched. "For our family. Our family," I repeated slowly. "You mean the family you broke in my bed?" His face twisted. "I made a mistake." "A mistake," I said, "is forgetting an anniversary. You made choices. And now you want me to remain miserable so you don't have to face the consequences." He stepped forward. "Andrea, please," I held up my hand. "Robert, if you say one more word, I'm calling the police and telling them a strange man is crying on my porch." He froze. I leaned in, voice low. "Go, live whatever life you've chosen. Stop trying to drag me back into it." He stared at me for a long moment, then his expression hardened. "He'll leave you." I smiled. "Maybe, but at least I'll have lived before he does." Robert's jaw clenched. "You think you won?" "I did," I said softly, "and I'm done explaining it." I closed the door. That night, my phone buzzed with a message from my son. "Mom, we need to talk. Dad says Marcus is after your money." I stared at the text until my vision blurred with rage. Then I typed back, "Tell your father to find a hobby." I already did. The next day, Susan showed up at my house again. My stomach tightened, bracing for battle. She stood in my doorway with a garment bag in her hands. "I'm not staying long," she said stiffly. "Okay," I replied cautiously. She held out the bag. "This is a dress for the wedding." I blinked. "Whose wedding?" She rolled her eyes. "Yours." My throat tightened. "Susan." She swallowed, gaze flickering away. "I can't promise I'm thrilled, but you're my mom, and I don't want you walking down the aisle alone like you don't matter." My eyes stung. I hated it. I loved it. "I asked you to be my friend," I whispered. "Can you do that?" Susan hesitated, then nodded once sharp, like she was afraid to soften too much. "I can try," she said quietly. I stepped forward and hugged her before she could stop me. She stiffened for a second, then slowly her arms came around me. "Don't make a big deal," she muttered. "Oh, sweetheart," I said, voice trembling with humor and tears. "I make big deals. It's my brand." She snorted, and I felt something in my chest loosen. The morning of the wedding was bright. The garden smelled like flowers and possibility. Kate was everywhere at once, yelling into her phone, directing people like a woman possessed. Marcus was getting ready in a separate room, and I refused to see him. I wanted that moment, the first look. I wanted the drama, because if I've earned anything at 66, it's the right to be theatrical on my own terms. Susan helped me with my dress. Her hands trembled slightly as she fastened the buttons. "You look pretty," she said, voice awkward. I smiled at my reflection. "I look alive." She nodded, and her eyes glistened. "Yeah." Kate bustled in. "Andrea, it's time." My heart pounded. Then, right as I reached for my bouquet sunflowers, of course my son appeared in the doorway. His face was tight. "Mom." Susan turned sharply. "What are you doing here?" He ignored her, stepping inside. "Mom, please, don't do this." I stared at him, something cold settling in my stomach. "We've been over this." He swallowed hard. "Dad's outside. He wants to talk." "He says I don't care what he says." I cut in. My son's voice rose. "Marcus is younger than me. So what?" I snapped. "You're older than your sister. Should we separate you for decency?" Susan gasped. "Andrea, I'm joking," I said, then looked back at my son. "Listen to me. I spent decades living carefully so nobody would judge me. And what did that get me? Betrayal, loneliness, a discount on a grave. I am done living for other people's comfort." My son's eyes flashed. "So you're cutting us off?" "No," I said, voice steady. "You cut yourselves off when you chose greed over love." He flinched. Susan stepped forward. "You supported Dad in court after he cheated on Mom." My son's jaw clenched. "He's our father, and she's your mother." Susan shot back. "Or did you forget?" Silence burned. Then my son's shoulders sagged, and for a second he looked like a boy again. I'm scared, he admitted quietly. What if he hurts you? That landed differently. I softened a fraction. Sweetheart, I said, stepping closer, I have been hurt. I survived. The world didn't end. And even if Marcus leaves someday, at least I will have lived in the time I had. My son's eyes filled with tears. Dad says you'll regret it. I smiled gently. Your father has a lot of opinions for a man who couldn't keep his pants on. Susan snorted despite herself. My son wiped his face quickly, embarrassed. Mom, I cupped his cheek, something I hadn't done in years. You can be part of my life, I whispered, but you cannot control it. He swallowed. And if I can't, I'm not invited. That's right, I said. Not as a punishment, as a boundary. He nodded slowly, then stepped back. I don't know if I can watch it, he said, voice breaking. That's okay, I replied. You don't have to watch, but you do have to respect. He stood there a moment longer, then turned and left without another word. Susan exhaled shakily. Well, that was something. I looked at her. Are you okay? She nodded, wiping her eyes. I'm fine. I'm your friend, remember? I smiled. Right, my friend. Kate burst in again. Andrea, we're starting. The music began outside, soft, sweet, not funeral-like at all. The guests murmured. My heart thudded. Susan took my arm. You ready? She asked. I lifted my chin. I've been ready for years. We stepped out into the garden, and there at the end of the aisle stood Marcus. He wore a suit that made him look like a man from an old film, clean lines, calm presence. His eyes locked onto mine, and I watched his face change as he saw me. Not just admiration, reverence. Like he couldn't believe he was allowed to love me. I felt my throat tighten again. I kept walking anyway. Halfway down the aisle, I caught a glimpse of someone near the back. Robert, standing outside the garden gate, watching like a man staring at a life he threw away. He lifted a hand as if to call out. Kate appeared out of nowhere like an avenging angel and stepped in front of him. I couldn't hear what she said, but Robert's face twisted, and then he backed away. God bless Kate. Every woman needs a friend who will bodyguard her happiness. At the front, Marcus reached for my hands. They were warm. He leaned in slightly and whispered, You're stunning. I whispered back, You're lucky. His smile trembled. I know. The officiant began, voice floating over the garden like a blessing. When it was time for vows, Marcus looked straight at me and said, Andrea, you taught me what strength looks like. Not the loud kind, the steady kind, the kind that survives and still chooses joy. I promise to honor you, to be your partner, to never make you feel alone in a room again. My vision blurred. I blinked hard. When it was my turn, I took a deep breath. Marcus, I said, voice clear, I have lived a long time believing love is something you earn by sacrificing yourself. I don't believe that anymore. With you, I feel seen, not as an age, not as a bank account, not as a problem to manage. As a woman, I promise to stand beside you, not behind you. I promise to keep choosing life. And I promise, I paused, smiling through tears, to never let you buy boring flowers. Sunflowers forever. The guests laughed softly. Marcus's eyes shone. Deal. When we said I do, the world didn't explode. The sky didn't split. There was no dramatic punishment. There was only applause, sunlight, flowers, and the steady warmth of a man's hands holding mine. Afterward, at the reception, Susan stood beside me as I greeted guests. She looked nervous at first, then gradually relaxed, smiling as people congratulated her as if she were part of my happiness rather than an obstacle to it. My son didn't come. It hurt, but it didn't ruin me. Because I understood something now. Love doesn't mean surrendering your life to someone else's fear. Late in the evening, when the music softened and the guests began to drift away, Marcus and I slipped into the garden again. The lanterns glowed. The air smelled like flowers and cake. He pulled me close. Mrs. He began, testing the new title like it was precious. I lifted an eyebrow. Don't get too excited. I'm still Andrea. He smiled. My wife. I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't hide my grin. Yes, your wife. He kissed my forehead. Are you happy? I looked around the quiet garden, the leftover petals, the empty chairs. The night sky stretched wide like a promise. I thought about Susan's shouting, about cemetery discounts, about Robert in my bed with Angela, about courtrooms and betrayal and the years I slept 4 hours to keep everyone afloat. Then I looked at Marcus steady, warm, real. I'm not just happy, I said softly. I'm free. He held me tighter. Good. And somewhere in the distance, a bee hummed near the flowers alive, stubborn, doing what bees do. I smiled, because my children had been right about one thing. I do like flowers and bees, but not in a cemetery. Here, in life. And if anyone ever tries to bury me again while I'm still breathing, whether with discounts, guilt, or greed, I already know what to do. I'll open the door, and I'll kick them out.